at some of the top stories. Over 100 aid and rights organizations have issued an urgent call for action as hunger deepens in Gaza, demanding an immediate, permanent ceasefire and the removal of all aid restrictions. The groups say starvation is spreading while truckloads of life-saving supplies remain blocked outside the Strip. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has vowed to present a new anti-corruption plan after signing a controversial law that weakens independent anti-graft agencies, prompting protest and rare criticism from its European allies. Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine are set to hold their first peace talks in 7 weeks in Istanbul. With the meeting scheduled for 7 p.m. local time, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is expected to open the session while hosting delegations from all three countries. A suspected administrator of the major Russian language cybercrime forum XSS has been arrested in Ukraine with assistance from French police and Europol police. According to French prosecutors, the arrest marks a significant move against one of the most active online hubs for cybercrime and criminals in Russia and beyond. Dozens of truckloads of U.S.-funded contraceptives stored since the U.S. President Donald Trump's call for foreign aid freeze are now set to be incinerated in France, despite a UN offer to purchase them. According to media reports, NGOs warn the destruction will deepen contraceptive shortages and could lead to a rise in unsafe abortions. The newly elected Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has unveiled a cabinet reshuffle, appointing Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski as Deputy Prime Minister and creating a new super ministry to combine finance and economy. This comes amid falling poll numbers and growing tensions with new nationalist President Karol Nawrocki. The International Court of Justice will issue a landmark advisory opinion regarding states' legal obligations to combat climate change, a ruling expected to shape global climate litigation while non-binding. The opinion carries significant legal and political influence. Maherin Chowdhury, a 46-year-old teacher, has died saving her students after a Bangladesh Air Force F-7 BGI jet crashed into her school on Monday, killing at least 29 people despite being engulfed in flames. She repeatedly ran into the burning building to rescue her students, sacrificing her life in an act of extraordinary bravery, her family has said. Russian delegation has arrived to Istanbul for peace talks with Ukraine. Ukraine says it is ready for a ceasefire with Russia, but outcomes depend on Russia's constructive stance. The new round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine is set to begin today, marking the third phase of renewed negotiations facilitated by Turkey. The trilateral meeting will take place at the historic Chiragan Palace on the Bosphorus. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan will open the session, which will also see the participation of Turkey's National Intelligence Chief Ibrahim Kalin and Chief of General Staff General Metin Gurak. Delegations from both Moscow and Kyiv are expected to attend, following previous sessions held in May and June. Those talks resulted in prisoner exchanges and the return of fallen soldiers. All eyes are now turning to Istanbul as efforts to mediate progress continue. Now we are joined by Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Vickery, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, how optimistic should we be about the potential for progress here, given the history of previous negotiations?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It is always good to have people get together to talk rather than to kill each other. Peace, like war, has to be waged. It's not a one-step transaction. President Trump said that he would solve this problem on day one in office. That, of course, did not happen because that's not the way international affairs work. He evidently had been relying on his relationship with Putin to bring an end to it. And again, personal relationships are not dispositive in regard to international affairs. So it's good that they're talking. It seems to me that President Trump does have an interest in stopping the fighting, even though he wasn't able to fulfill his promise. And his understanding of Putin, it seems to have increased to the point where he is threatening additional sanctions, indeed third-party sanctions against Russia if they don't come to the table and talk. But the parties are still very, very far apart. The chief question is whether or not there will be a ceasefire and any concessions in regard to the territorial demands of each party.
And Raymond, now the Kremlin has also mentioned this morning that issues relating to draft memorandums and exchanges. So what kinds of agreements or compromises could realistically emerge from these discussions?
Well, I think that realistically, there are territorial concessions and adjustments that can be made, not just completely giving up the territory, but the Donbass has been a fluid concept for some time. Beyond that, it seems to me that the kinds of security guarantees in regard to the perceived threats that Putin has put forward many times could be put there. It's not in the cards for Ukraine to give up its defenses, as Putin has asked, but there could be a face-saving approach in terms of any threats of NATO to Russia. In fact, NATO is not a threat to Russia. It's a defensive pact. But Putin has conflated that with peace in the area. And that's an area in which there can be talks. Also, there are economic factors that can go into this. The Russian and Ukraine economies were very, very close, obviously, during the Soviet period. And there are advantages for both sides in that. And economics is not to be considered completely apart from security matters. So I think that those are three areas in which there could be concessions and compromises made. But it isn't going to happen without continued pressure from the international community. Great democracies like India, Europe, and the United States have to stand shoulder to shoulder that this is not the way in which international affairs can be conducted, that if you have a grievance that you simply march in an army and start killing people and taking over territory.
Raymond, thank you very much for your insight. Please stay with us as now we come back to you for our next discussions. Now we move on to our next news. Germany is seeking guarantees from the United States before sending its Patriot missile defense systems to Ukraine. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius emphasized the need for watertight assurances. This follows US President Donald Trump's recent agreement with NATO Chief Mark Rutte, encouraging European allies to supply Patriot systems to Kyiv, with plans for the US to provide replacements. Germany has pledged to finance 2 systems, while other NATO members have expressed interest in financing additional units. However, Pistorius highlighted ongoing discussions about which countries currently have Patriots available. Let's listen to what he has said.
Es gibt keinen neuen Sachstand. Heute gibt es verschiedene Zusammenkünfte auf verschiedenen Ebenen, auch virtuell. um zu eruieren, wo gibt es denn jetzt in welchen Ländern in Europa und darüber hinaus Patriots, in welcher Stückzahl, bei denen die Länder bereit sind, sie abzugeben. Wir haben Bereitschaft signalisiert, Norwegen und Schweden Systeme zu finanzieren, die Niederländer auch anteilig. Also es gibt Geld für diese Patriots, es muss jetzt nur noch die Patriots geben.
The situation underscores the delicate balance NATO allies face in supporting Ukraine's defense while maintaining their own regional security. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Raymond Vickery. He's a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Thank you, Raymond, for staying with us. Now, what do these guarantees entail, and why is Germany being particularly cautious in its commitment to this military support?
Well, you know, you can't be too cautious when you have President Trump who says one thing one day and moves in another direction on the next. Patriot missiles are very important to Germany in regard to its own self-defense. So it has to have assurances which are ironclad that there will be replacement of these systems so that Germany will not be left in the lurch in regard to Russia. The caution of Germany, it seems to me, is an indication of the weakness of President Trump's approach that everything is a transaction, that it's a one-off kind of situation. There's a winner and a loser in it. When you have that approach, then people who have been your partners and cooperating and trying to build relationships rather than just transactions naturally get very nervous about what the future holds. So this is to be expected. It is an unfortunate result, it seems to me, of a lack of confidence which is engendered by this transactional approach to international affairs rather than relationship building.
Thank you, Raymond, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as you will be on our next discussion as well. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the Trump administration is not in a hurry to name a successor to Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, whose term runs through May 2026. In interviews recently, Bessent stressed that Powell does not need to resign, despite President Trump's repeated calls for him to step down. While Trump has said he would not fire Powell, he has openly hoped he quits. Bessent confirmed discussions on potential replacements are underway, with several strong female candidates both within the Fed and among regional bank presidents being considered. He also renewed calls for a sweeping internal review of the Fed's operations, excluding monetary policy, saying the institution has expanded unchecked for years. Criticism has grown over the Fed's $2.5 billion renovation project, with Bessent highlighting the need for oversight and accountability. Meanwhile, Powell has given no indication he plans to leave before his term ends. Markets widely expect the Fed to hold interest rates steady at its next meeting, but are pricing in a possible rate cut by September. Now we go to our guest discussion with Raymond Vickery. Raymond, thank you for staying with us. Now, what's your reaction about this news?
Well, it seems to me that what Secretary Bessent is doing is trying to get the horse back in the barn, if you will, after the remarks of President Trump that he wants Powell to step down, he wants to destroy the independence of the Fed. This has had a very adverse market reaction. Secretary Bessent has a Wall Street background, and he understands how dangerous it is to destroy the independence of the Fed. You know, we've had an independent Fed in the United States since 1912, and markets have come to rely on the Fed as a check on what politicians want to do, which is to have easy money most of the time. politicians by and large say, yes, let's lower interest rate, let's get things going, but it's like a sugar high, if you will, because the after effects are very bad. But most politicians are not interested in the long term. Many of them, some of them are like President Trump. What's in it for me right now? And if you can lower interest rates and have a temporary high, then you can say that you have accomplished something. So Secretary Bessant is trying to assure the markets that there will be independence of the Fed. At the same time, he's trying to placate his boss, if you will, President Trump, by saying, well, there's been mismanagement and we have to have a review. The ironic factor in regard to the $2.5 billion which has been spent or is being spent on renovation, not only the Fed, but next door, the Department of the Interior building is also being renovated. The ironic part is that cheaper materials were prescribed in the first point, and it was Trump people who said, well, let's take this and change it from plaster to marble. Let's upgrade this. Let's make it look more like the Oval Office, if you will, which if you've seen pictures lately, show a very gaudy gold and marble approach to interior decoration. So that's what's going on, and Bessant is trying to balance his obligations to try to keep the market steady, at the same time placate President Trump, who wants to aggrandize power in regard to the Fed in his own hands.
Thank you very much, Raymond Vickery, for joining us and sharing your insight as a U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Israel has finally completed its inquiry on its strike on Gaza, on the Seoul Gaza's church. The Israeli military has admitted its strike on the Holy Family Church in Gaza City, which killed 3 people, was caused by an unintentional deviation of munitions. The statement added that the incident occurred during a military operation and has prompted new guidelines for firing near religious and sensitive sites. The attack, which took place on 17 July, sparked global outrage, with Cardinal confirming the church was hit directly, and Italian Prime Minister Meloni also condemning the strike. Now we're joined by Ahmed Fattu. He's a spokesperson for the Fatah movement, joining us live from Ramallah. Thank you, Ahmed, for joining us today. Good to see you. The attack on a religious site like the Holy Family Church has sparked global outrage. Now, how can Israel balance its security concerns with the need to protect sensitive sites, especially in densely populated and religiously significant areas like Gaza?
Thank you for having me. I have to say that Israel is not bombing to preserve their security. They are bombing for extermination. I think the evidence is overwhelming. Israel has said through its Knesset, through its leaders, through its party members in the coalition of the extremist far-right government, that they want and aim to mass transfer the Palestinian people. So this is an established fact, that Israel is fighting for the sake of destruction and bombardment. Now, what happened in the church is actually not new to Israel. Israel in 2023, in 20th of October, bombed a historical mosque from the 7th century. And it had a library that has manuscript that goes back to the 14th century. Israel also bombed the Greek Orthodox Church that was in 2024. And now they bombed the only Catholic church in Gaza. We have to see the pattern here, that Israel actually disregard international law, disregard our common values and morals of respecting religious sites, respecting schools, respecting hospitals. They just bomb, indiscriminately for destruction, and they have been desecrating holy sites forever actually. Each day Israel desecrates the third most holy mosque to 2 billion Muslims, which is Al-Aqsa Mosque. Each single day it's desecrated by Israeli far-right settlers and extremists who does not care and are not and protected actually by the Israeli police. So there is a pattern here, and the world needs to address that Israel is a rogue state that does not respect international humanitarian law, does not respect the Geneva Conventions, does not respect Rome Statute for human rights, and continues its extreme violation. Therefore, it requires an immediate sanctions for doing these crimes in order to stop and hold Israel from its crime against humanity that is taking place right now. Israel is the last state in the world to be taken as any source of trustworthy for any investigation. A state that is starving people to death and just recently starved more than 80 children to death is, I believe, and everyone believes, is the final and the last state on earth that we should trust.
Now, Ahmed, Israel has announced new guidelines for firing near religious and sensitive sites. So what do you think these guidelines could mean for future Israeli military operations? Will they be having any effect on them?
They don't have any effects. There have been countless number of testimonies by Israeli soldiers who came to the news, in Israeli news actually, and said we are ordered to shoot and to kill. There's no limits. Now they say they put some limits. We have to, once again, we have to remember that Israel is starving right now as we speak children to death. So I don't think that is a state that is moral or does share our principles to even trust for being anything sincere to what they say. By the way, I have to point out that the Cardinal Pierre Batista, the Patriarch of Jerusalem to the Latin Church, said that Israel hit directly, Israeli attacks directly hit the Latin Church. So we have to ask questions here because it was deliberate and in purpose.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic. Now, Israel and Ukraine have begun a strategic dialogue to tackle the Iranian threat. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar announced during a press conference in Kyiv. Sa'ar said Iran poses a threat not only to Israel but to regional and global security, including Ukraine. He claimed Israel's recent strikes on Iran had pushed back its nuclear ambitions by years and damaged its ballistic missile and drone programs, the latter of which is used in attacks on Ukraine. Sa'ar urged Germany, France, and the UK to reimpose global sanctions on Iran through the snapback mechanism. Let's listen in to what Israel's Gideon Sa'ar and Ukraine's Andriy Sybiga have to say.
Iran not only threatened Israel, it threatened regional and global security. It threatened Ukraine. We decided today to have a strategic dialogue between our ministries on the Iranian threat. Our actions against its weapons and technology contribute to European security and to the security of Ukraine. Iran must not be allowed to continue its nuclear ambition.
Сьогодні предметні переговори з широкого спектру питань: безпека, гуманітарна та економічна співпраця, розвиток інновацій та спільні проекти. Україна та Ізраїль мають значний потенціал у сфері оборонних технологій. Настав час реалізовувати його спільно заради безпеки та стабільності обидвох держав.
We go to our guest discussion with Berzin Wagmar. He's joining us from London. Thank you, Berzin, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, Ukraine's inclusion in the dialogue, traditionally centered in Middle Eastern security, marks a shift in its geopolitical alignments. Can you tell us why is that, and what does this timing state about Israel and Ukraine?
First things first, even before the February 2022 Russian-Ukraine war started, Iran was killing Ukrainians. And please recollect what happened in January 2020 with the crash of the Ukrainian flight from Tehran to Kiev, which saw all 176 dead on board. Tehran has not been made accountable for that, and there was denial on its part and subsequent acknowledgement that the Revolutionary Guards did fire a missile which brought down that civilian air carrier. So this is happening even before the war commenced in February 2022. Then what happened next is that what does Iran have to gain by murdering and massacring Ukrainians and supplying Russia and Putin with Shahid 131 and 136 drones, which it initially began and which are now produced with joint collaboration in Russian Tatarstan. Not only are IRGC Revolutionary Guard commandos operating in operational capacity in occupied Crimea, but Iran has also supplied short-range ballistic missiles, ammunition, flak jackets, and helmets to the Russian army. So the contention is, quite frankly, that Ukraine has held its patience for over 2+ years now, and it's high time something was done about Iran on this. And for Israel to come in at an opportune time is quite overdue. And it is only necessary that not just Ukraine and Israel face a threat, but the entire region, the GCC at large, does face a threat. That's to say the Gulf Cooperation Council states, for whom Iran has been an existential threat since 1979. A denial which is simply not on the cards.
Thank you very much, Berzin Bagmer, for joining us today all the way from London and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our next news. Ozzy Osbourne, the legendary frontman of Black Sabbath and one of the most influential figures in heavy metal, has died at the age of 76. The rock icon passed away peacefully, surrounded by family, according to a statement released by the Osbourne family. While no official cause of death has been given, Osbourne had been battling Parkinson's disease since 2019, and he underwent multiple surgeries in recent years. Known to millions as the Prince of Darkness, Osbourne rose to fame with Black Sabbath in the 1970s, helping to define the heavy metal genre with classic albums like Paranoid and Master of Reality. His solo career produced hits like Crazy Train and Bark at the Moon, while his family life became a global sensation through the reality TV series The Osbournes. His final performance took place on July 5th last year at Birmingham's Villa Park Stadium, a powerful farewell to the city where it all began. Fans in Birmingham have since set up a memorial to pay tribute to a man who forever changed the face of rock music. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.